story time with me. 'Tis I, Cory Robin here. So, hello everybody. Welcome to Story Time with Cory. I am reading once again from the Bound for the Backcountry book. Let me zoom in a little bit. This is a great book. It's written by Richard H. Holm Jr. It's available just about everywhere. Today we're going to talk about Stibnite, which is a mining and town development, but there's also an airstrip there, which is really exciting. So let's go ahead and jump right on in. Looks like we got a whole bunch of people on, and I'll jump in the chat and interact with you. How's it going, Hayden? Welcome to the live stream. Jason, how are you? Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. I don't know who gave me that, but yes, we have a fire on one screen. And on the other screen, we have my relaxation channel just in the background, showing a river run and maybe some other things. So let's jump right into the story, and then afterwards, we'll go ahead and answer your questions and comments, and here we go. I'm kind of doing a new kind of software here for the live stream, using my Canon. Oh, the sync is off? Shoot. Well, let's adjust the sync in real time. Wait a minute. Jason, you got to be more clear. Anyway, I'm just gonna roll with it. Jason says that it's off by half a second. Oh, that sucks. Darn. I don't quite know how to adjust it. Give us a sec, folks. We're going to try and adjust the audio a little bit in real time, and that'll give us time for chats. Oh, Jason, thanks for suggesting the fire. Hello, Atlas. So you're saying it's half a second behind? I don't want to hear it. You got to just tell me. You might need to put headphones on. I can adjust the delay, I guess.
It's not. It goes all over the map. It's not consistent.
Oh, the delay's not
so
consistent?
Let it roll. I think let it roll, because the audio is what we're caring about, and your picture, your beautiful face.
My beautiful face. All right, well, let's go.
Show us good pictures.
Yeah, good pictures, like holding it up to the camera like this. Look at that. Yes. Okay, so let's go ahead and start the story. Thanks for joining. Sorry about the snafu with the audio. I hope it's acceptable, but here we go. Gold and other valuable ore deposits were found in this area around the turn of the 20th century. Antimony and stibnite dominated and are both used as steel hardeners. At the time of its discovery, these ores were not in high demand. Interest slowly developed during the time of the World Wars, leading to a sizable mining operations in the area. In 1919, Al Hennessy located claims and formed the Meadow Creek Silver Mines Company with partners J.L. Nidday and John Oberbillig. A short time after its creation, their property was sold to United Mercury Mines Company, headed by Oberbillig. The new company then acquired many other claims. Hennessy and Nidday went on to locate claims on the East Fork of the South Fork and formed the Great Northern Mines Company. I'm going to switch over to the chat room here so I can see your chats. Oh. The firm later became the Yellow Pine Mine. In 1928, Oberbilling and his associates confirmed many favorable deposits, and an option was signed for $1.5 million with F.W. Bradley. The Yellow Pine Company was then formed and controlled by Bradley with participation from other mining companies. By 1937, most of the financially extractable ore was mined out of the Meadow Creek deposit and the company moved to another claim originally located by Hennessy. The high operating costs of the gold mining operations severely cut into their profit. In the late 1930s, F.W. Bradley died, and the Yellow Pine Company was taken over by Bradley Mining Company of California. Under new ownership, son Jack Bradley ran the mining interests in Idaho and eventually took over the whole company. Extending into the World War II era, the Bradley Mining Company and the company-owned town of Stibnite boomed. The floundering gold operation came into its own as the wartime demand for antimony increased. The company could barely keep up with the production demanded and was at first restricted by the available electricity provided by their generators. This was solved in 1944 when Idaho Power completed a 100-mile transmission line. New equipment was brought in and they were milling up to 700 tons per day. Wow, that's a lot. The whole town was transformed. Within a year, the population peaked at roughly 600 people. The company invested in over 100 modern homes, a 4-room schoolhouse, general store, a new hospital, service station, a recreational hall, with bowling lanes, a restaurant, and an auditorium. By 1945, much of the tungsten ore was gone and the company expanded, buying options on the Sunnyside Mine and Dewey Mines in the Thunder Mountain area. Even with an optimistic outlook, by the early 1950s, things slowed down. Miners encountered several operational problems and health hazards from arsenic fumes. Ooh. Then in 1951, the antimony market collapsed. In 1955, the company liquidated its assets in Stibnite. The structures were eventually purchased by Warren Campbell of McCall and trucked out. Many of these houses were then relocated to various Idaho communities, including McCall, Cascade, Donnelly, Council, Cambridge, Payette, Emmett, and Brunau. Is it Brunau? Brunau? I don't know. In the 1970s, Ranchers Exploration and Development Corporation of Albuquerque, New Mexico acquired an option on the patented mining claims retained by the Bradley family. By the end of the decade, the ranchers' firm began working with a mining company called Canadian Superior, a collaboration that lasted a number of years. A Canadian oil company that had a minerals division then bought out Canadian Superior. Mobil then acquired the oil business. Shortly after that acquisition, the site was declared a Superfund site and Mobil spent several $1 million in cleanup efforts. In more recent years, the Bradley family sold their patented claims in the area to Midas Gold of Spokane. A large amount of high-tech drilling and exploration has taken place, and large gold deposits are believed to still exist in the area. In fact, one of the large gold ore bodies may be right below the old runway. Aviation played a major role in the operation and development of the mining efforts. In the Stibnite area, the airfield built in the fall of 1930 was sometimes called Meadow Creek, named for the mining claim on which it was constructed. The first aircraft landed here in November 24, 1930, when George Stonebreaker and pilot Ray Fisher brought in passengers and supplies in a 6-place Belanca. Well, that's cool. Stonebreaker had the mail contract from Cascade to Yellow Pine and Stibnite. He brought the plane to make the trip much faster in the winter months. In the winter of 1932, the airfield became important again as the mine lost all of its fuel supply when a pipeline buried deep beneath the snow ruptured. In order to keep the mill running, A.A. Bennett flew in petroleum. He flew it all in with 2 Zenith cabin biplanes hauling 5 30-gallon drums of oil per trip. He also used an open cockpit Stearman that carried only 1 90-gallon tank per trip. 90-gallon tank, wow. Within 1 month, he and pilots Bob King and Chick Walker had brought in 12,000 gallons of fuel to keep things running. In these early years of operation, the strip was only used by ski-equipped aircraft during the winter months, as the surface was too rough and unimproved for wheel operations. As time progressed, the company developed it into a nice gravel runway measuring 2,450 feet long. Even though a road was finally constructed from Yellow Pine to Stibnite by the early 1930s, it was not plowed during the winter until 1941. Even when it was kept open, it periodically closed because of slides and rapid snow accumulation. As a result, airplanes were widely used for transporting equipment, supplies, and residents. The World War II tungsten boom at Stibnite equally affected the use of aviation in the operation. Bradley mainly contracted with Johnson Flying Service during those years. Penn Storr Sr. handled the majority of the flying from Johnson's operation in Cascade along with Dick Johnson, leaving brother Bob to run the Missoula end of the business. The war years for Storr and D. Johnson were very busy, particularly flying for Bradley's and their mail contract. The two pilots used company aircraft for these flights, including several different travel airs. Storr lived full-time in Cascade, and for national defense reasons, the pilots were deputized as law enforcement officers. Going along on many of these trips was Storr's oldest son, Dan. The young Storr saw a lot of exciting events and interesting cargo in connection with the mining operations. On several occasions, he sat in the back while hauling cases of liquor. His job was to prevent them from smashing together in the rough air. One return flight Storr never forgot was when he had to bring out the body of a dead miner who had been killed in an accident. With the cold winter conditions and the contraction of muscles at the time of death, his body was in a very odd position. Several men, including the dead miner's brother, were at the airfield trying to help Storr maneuver the body through the small back door of the travel air. Watching the scene unfold was young wide-eyed Dan. He had never seen a dead person before, and the brother of the guy started cussing and mumbling under his breath. "You always were a no-good SOB. You never did want to cooperate. Get on in here." Stuffing a body in the back of a travel air. Woo! That's no fun. Johnson Flying Service continued to fly for the Bradleys after the war. In 1946, Johnson pilot Warren Ellison was flying a Ford Trimotor for the company. Bradley wanted to rush some equipment to a new prospect at the head of Springfield Creek, which flows into the Little Pistol Creek and then the Middle Fork. The plan was for Ellison to make several trips from the Stibnite airfield, drop supplies with chutes, and then return until several tons of equipment, including pumps, pipe, drill rods, baled hay, and gas engines, were all delivered by parachute. With 2 trips under his belt, Ellison returned to the spot with his third load. While cargo kickers began unloading the supplies, the right outboard engine lost all power. Ellison knew with the aircraft near gross weight, he could not maintain sufficient altitude to return to Stibnite. He gave the cargo kickers instructions to start throwing the remaining supplies out the door to lighten the airplane. With the orders given to his crew members, he focused on flying. Knowing the train fell away towards the Middle Fork, he pointed the Ford in that direction. He navigated his way down Little Pistol Creek and was able to make a safe landing at Thomas Creek. When he figured he had the runway made, he pulled the power back and noticed the right outboard engine was idling just fine. After shutdown, Ellison determined that the throttle rod connection had come loose and caused the engine to simply go to idle. The manufacturer had put in place an automatic spring-loaded device that in such an event was to throw the engine to half power. However, the backup device failed. Once the problem was discovered, Ellison and his crew fixed it and within the day returned to Stibnite for another load and finished the job. Has anybody ever had a throttle quadrant or the push rod come loose? I actually have in my Wilga. It actually happened up at Johnson Creek, Idaho. I had to land, the engine was stuck at maybe 3/4 throttle, and I had to come in for landing at Johnson Creek, and I controlled power by turning on and off the mags. So if I wanted to reduce power, since I had no throttle control, it was kind of like old school. So I had the right mags completely off, and I was just bumping the left mag on and off. And so I probably sounded like a World War I airplane where they used the ignition controls to turn on and off the engine. So I was like, brah, brah, brah. So I pretty much elected to just stay almost full power until my base leg, and then I just shut off the engine and let it windmill, and if I needed a little bump of power for a second, I would just hit the mag switch for a second, and it was interesting, rather interesting experience. Johnson Flying Service continued to fly their bigger aircraft for Bradley, but less frequently because in 1943 Jack Bradley started his own aviation division. The same year, a large permanent hangar was constructed in Stibnite. In 1946, Bradley expanded the business to include an airport facility in Boise called Bradley Field. Prior to this, he did have a smaller flight operation located at College Field in Boise. At the old location, he predominantly used a Curtiss Robin and a Stinson Voyager. The company eventually purchased a Travel Air 6000 and slowly incorporated several Navions. Bradley Field was dedicated in memory of Jack's father. This airport became known nationally for its innovative design and features such as a motel for guests right off the tie-down area. Fitting for the modern futuristic post-war America, the facility was often advertised as a skyport for wilderness flyers or as a skytel, like a motel, but a skytel. Because motel actually came from motor vehicles, and so it makes sense that it was skytel. That's pretty clever. Other than attractive guest accommodations and supplying the mining operations, which also expanded during these years to other locations in the state, it was a full-service FBO. The flight department of the mining company was officially called Aircraft Service Company, which consisted of fuel sales, a maintenance shop, flight training, an air taxi service. Various general managers ran the operation, and several full-time pilots came and went over the years. These included Les Randolph, Glenn Eichelberger, I think that's how to say it, Ray Crowder, Jim Cutler, Glenn Higbee, Larry Fisher, Harold Dugal, and occasionally Bob Clarkson. In the early years of the Bradley Field operation, flying lessons were offered at a highly discounted price to mining employees. About a dozen people in management positions took advantage of this offer. The aircraft division reached its apex in the early 1950s. They had added several Navions, a Ford Trimotor, a Cessna 195, and leased a Cessna 190 from local pilot Joe Tirling. And in November 1959, Jack Bradley, his wife Jane, and his brother Worthen were killed in a car accident in San Francisco. Not only did the family struggle through the following years, but the mining operations did as well. By the mid-1950s, the flight department became less important as it was primarily a function of the mines. In 1957 through 58, the other parts of the aircraft service company, such as the charter business, could not justify their operation, and the assets were liquidated. Over the years, Bradley Field had other flight services come and go, but the airport was permanently closed in 1973. Aircraft access had clearly become a part of life in Stibnite. The subject was regularly covered in the town's local newspaper, the Stibnite Miner, and even made national publications. For example, the Saturday Evening Post covered the subject in the December 8, 1951 edition under the article, "Want to Get Away from It All?" by Neil Clark. That'd be kind of fun to find that. So it was the Saturday Evening Post, December 8th, 1951 edition, and the article name was, quote, "Want to Get Away from It All?" unquote, and the author was Neil Clark. That'd be kind of fun to find that article. In February 1949, the town made local newspaper headlines when the road from Warm Lake to the town was closed by nearly 40 slides. Unable to reopen the roads when one storm followed another, the town was completely cut off. The Bradley employees were unable to plow out most of the slides because some were 30 feet deep and full of heavy rock debris. Each slide had to be carefully dynamited, and then heavy equipment cleared out the road. The Boise area papers caught wind of the event, and several politicians decided that they were going to save the starving town. Ooh, politics. In reality, the community had enough to survive, but the Air National Guard based in Boise became involved. The Guard made several cargo drops with their Douglas C-47s, buzzing low right over the runway. As the town stood watching, they thought they were getting bombed. Food such as potatoes exploded into 1,000 pieces as it hit the hard-packed runway. It turned out about only half of the cargo chutes opened. Other goods lost in the cause were hams, bread, and produce. Although some of the food was usable, the overall outcome was a major loss of resources. The local dogs had a field day. A few days after the emergency drop, the roads were opened. Few aircraft crashed at the airfield. One of the earliest known accidents occurred in September of 1942, when a single-engine plane stalled after takeoff and went into tailings dike behind the SA office near the airfield. A couple of years later, in 1948, the company's Travel Air 6000 was ground looped on takeoff, causing some wing damage. Another incident happened in November 1953 when one of the company's Navions, piloted by Jim Cutler, was carrying out two game wardens. Trying to beat a snow squall coming down the valley, Cutler got in a hurry, and it's believed that he did not remove some ice that had formed on the airplane's surfaces. The plane stalled shortly after clearing the end of the runway on takeoff. It hit the ground square on the tail and flipped over. The occupants were injured, but after a few days of treatment at the Stibnite hospital, were given a good bill of health. Cutler went on to have a career with West Coast Airlines. Many of the subsequent mining companies in the area also used the airstrip for quick access. In the 1970s, Ray Arnold of Arnold Aviation, located in Cascade, contracted with several of these companies. Arnold used a wide variety of aircraft, ranging from a Piper Super Cub to a Cessna 210. Over a 30-year time frame, Arnold himself hauled parts that ranged from those that would fit in his shirt pocket, such as a few O-rings, to cargoes at gross weight, full of 1.5-inch steel cable. The cables were needed to haul out a mining truck that had gone off the road. When they brought them back up the airstrip, the clevises on the ends of the cables had been pulled straight. The majority of the flights were not hauling parts, but rather shuttling personnel and gold between Stibnite and Spokane. A guard often accompanied the gold in the early years, but this was later changed. Many friends joked with Arnold about disappearing with the gold. He said it never really crossed his mind, although with $1 million worth of gold on board, he knew that if he ever had to make an emergency landing, someone would definitely want to find him. Flying similar flights was Pioneer Aviation, based in McCall and owned by Kirk Braun. Braun and his pilots flew comparable planes for Helka Mining Company, located in Coeur d'Alene. Pioneer transported employees to and from Stibnite to Coeur d'Alene headquarters and flew gold to Salt Lake. With the rise in gold prices in the early 2010s, the area again boomed. Arnold once more became involved with the transportation aspect of the operation, along with G&S Aviation, owned by George Doris. So that's the story of the Stibnite Mine Airstrip, which is just east of the Johnson Creek, Idaho airstrip, east of McCall, in the Frank Church Wilderness. It's still in use today. I've never landed there because it's still in use by the mining companies, but it is, from what I can understand, it is still a public use airport. Let's go back into the comments and do a quick Q&A. That'll be fun. So let's do that. Come on down. What do you got? What do you got for me in the questions, comments, concerns? Storytime, Texas. Mitch Carley, how are you? Robert Franz from New Zealand. Wow, very cool. Quest to Wells, thank you for loving Storytime. It's fun to do, and I get to read these awesome stories. Once again, this book is by Richard Holm Jr. It can be purchased in a lot of places. Amazon.com has it. It's called Bound for the Backcountry, and it's a history of Idaho's remote airstrips. As you can tell, it's a big, thick book. Lots of cool pictures, and really awesome. So I sure appreciate the ability to read the book. It's awesome. So check it out. Support Richard and his efforts to research. I mean, he went through a lot of research to document all the history of all these airstrips up in Idaho. So it's really amazing. Such a fantastic book, and I'm honored to be able to read it. If you guys have any aviation stories, maybe you've got family members from wars or whatever the case may be, I would love to read them in story time. So you can reach me at Cory@flyingcowboys.com and send those stories, or maybe we can have a phone conversation live, as it were, and tell the story live if you want. But let's go ahead and be safe, be sane. Let's jump in the comments and answer a few of your questions. 30% increase in people's temperatures in Utah. Outbreak on the horizon. Be safe, people. Where did you get that information? A 30% increase in people temperatures in Utah. Well, let's just play it safe with this whole crazy new world we're in. You know, use your wisdom and judgment and your social distancing guidelines. You know, don't touch your face, don't touch your eyes, wash your hands frequently. Why don't we do this? I have a little bit extra toilet paper and hand sanitizer. I'm going to pick somebody in the comments on any of the platforms. I mean, we're streaming right now on several platforms. We're on Periscope over on Twitter. We're on Facebook, on my personal page, and on my my video page. We're on Twitch. We're live on some Russian thing, ok.ru, whatever that is. And we're also live on YouTube, a whole bunch of people on YouTube. So thanks for joining. Let's get back. See, lots of Cubs and Kit Foxes out there. Does anybody fly Champs off airport? You know, the Champ is a good backcountry airplane. It's not necessarily great because it's not super duper short takeoff and landing, and it does approach a little bit faster. A bush plane, what's up? Did it do it?
It's time.
Okay, now you got to do the focus thing. So press the, let me go ahead and press it, and then kind of, here, I'll do it. Did you go to manual?
I don't know.
All right, hopefully it worked. Okay, it should have worked.
Okay.
We'll see. I don't know what's going on. It's showing as blank right now. So my camera has a, what the heck happened? My camera has a 30-minute timer on it, so I apologize for that. So weird. We're still figuring out all this live stream stuff. Such an amateur hour around here. Let's go back to the chat. Time out with Cory. Thanks. Cool stuff, useful tips. How about an old 150? You know, honestly, the best backcountry airplanes are the STOL airplanes, of course, but most, if not all, of the airstrips that are in this book are landable by just about any airplane. You can have a fantastic time learning backcountry flying in a Cessna 172, in a Cessna 182, in a Cherokee. The biggest thing about getting involved in backcountry is learning to read conditions and analyze landing strips to make sure they're suitable for your type of aircraft. For example, first time I ever went into Johnson Creek, Idaho, and Garden Valley, Idaho, and some of the longer ones, like Warm Springs and some of those are beautiful grass airstrips. And I went in there in a Mooney M20. And so you can really get into just about any of the published airstrips with almost any aircraft. Now, I wouldn't recommend going in with super beautiful wheel pants on your, Cessna 182 or whatever you got. Take off your wheel pants and then just go in there. It doesn't matter the size of the tires. A lot of these airstrips are just doable by any type of aircraft. And, I flew in the backcountry at the very beginning in a Cessna 182. And I had a little Kit Fox at one point, a Kit Fox Model 4. And I think I had 800s as far as the tires on it. So the airplane was capable of short takeoff and landing, but my tires were really small when I first started, and so I just didn't go into unimproved areas. The Super Cubs and the Kit Foxes and the Highlanders and all those things, and the stuff that I really enjoy doing is not really into any improved airstrip. It's really into just, okay, there's a mountain ridge, can I land there? And so you do an assessment. And that's somewhere where you might not want to take in a traditional aircraft that's not set up for really hardcore backcountry. So if that's worth anything to you. The skills, somebody mentioned what skills you need to fly in the backcountry. There's really no special skills other than aircraft mastery. Flying slow, in tight quarters, non-standard approaches, getting rid of the traditional sight picture thing in your mind. Some pilots, if you're used to landing on runways, get freaked out by the different widths of the runways, and so you've just got to really get used to knowing how high you are off the ground and getting used to different sight pictures, because in a lot of these areas there is no traditional sight picture where you're looking at runway lights and how wide a runway is. You're landing on dirt, you're landing on grass, you're landing on a mountain ridge, And so, you know, just aircraft mastery is a good way of putting it. And it's not any secret, super, you know, crazy skill. It's just simple backcountry flying. It's aircraft mastery. You know, I would highly recommend CC Pocock has a flight school that teaches bush and mountain flying. In McCall, there's a flight school at McCall Flying Service that has a great backcountry flying school. Kevin Quinn in the Truckee Lake Tahoe area teaches backcountry flying. You've got Tack Arrow in the Pacific Northwest, and they're also in Texas now and in Arizona that talk and teach really good backcountry flying skills. And that's really the best place to really cut your teeth on off-airport operations or backcountry flying, because you're going to get a really good flight instruction, a good curriculum that's going to transition you into those non-standard things that you're not used to when you're going into asphalt. And for those of you that are concerned about like things like flying behind the power curve, just get up and do some slow flight and entertain yourself by playing with the stall. You know, it can get annoying if your stall warning horn is on, so pull that breaker and turn that stall warning horn off and play with how the aircraft feels at minimum controllable airspeed. Use that throttle to bring the aircraft in and out of a stall, an imminent stall, instantly. And you can feel these things, and it's not rocket science, it's not difficult, it's just a different way of doing things. In primary flight training, you kind of learn to stay well within the safe parameters of flight, and then you learn emergency procedures and stalls and hopefully spins and things like that that teach you where that edge is so that you know how to recognize it. But they really want you to stay inside like a buffer zone, and that's really good for low time and student pilots. But then as you get a little time, you want to learn the full capabilities of your aircraft, and that's okay. You just do it at a safe altitude. I recommend flight instructors. There's no substitute for good instruction. I myself went to McCall Flying Service 20 some odd years ago, 23, 24 years ago, and had a flight instructor fly with me throughout a lot of the Idaho backcountry. In fact, I remember my very first backcountry landing was in Cabin Creek, Idaho. And I was with an instructor. But there's no substitute for the bush planes. They're a reason why we fly the Super Cubs, the Highlanders, the Kit Foxes. They're so ridiculously easy to fly that it takes these things and makes them really safe. You got a Kit Fox that stalls at 28 miles an hour, or a Super Cub that stalls at 24 miles an hour. That's really slow. And so you can get in there and safely approach it. Let's say a big, huge buffer, 35, 40 miles an hour on your approach speed. You're approaching significantly less with a lot less energy, and things slow down when your airplane's going slowly. Your penetration into those backcountry strips happens a lot more slowly if you've got an airplane that's capable of really good slow flight. So for what it's worth, you know, there's no substitute for fantastic equipment. So, you know, the Carbon Cub is my aircraft of choice. I love it. Cubcrafters does a great job supporting their customers. I've broken mine multiple times. I'm not perfect, but fantastic support from the factory. But there's all kinds of great Super Cubs out there. The old certified ones. You've got Legend Cub that makes a fantastic Cub. You've got Savage. They're a beautiful Cub. Tons of fantastic options on the market right now. And I've actually seen several aircraft, bush planes on the market just in the last couple of weeks, with people finishing up winter builds and then wanting to sell their older aircraft. You know, for example, my buddy Butch Kingston just listed his Carbon Cub EX, which is equipped very similar to mine, but he has a belly cargo pod. I think he only wants $160,000 for it, which for a Carbon Cub, that's ridiculous. So if you're on Facebook, there's a backcountry buy-sell trade group that's really fantastic. So check that out. Let's go back. Let's see. Replace the stick in the backcountry. Well, there is. You know, I've broken a lot of stuff. I've broken off tail wheels and logs and twigs and things. You can strap those to your airplane, and make sure you fly around with a nice hefty roll of Gorilla duct tape. Okay, have I been up to Kavanaugh Bay in Idaho? 66 Sierra. You know, I've been to so many places the last 20 years, I can't necessarily remember for sure whether I've not been to a particular place or not unless it really stood out. So maybe, but probably not. Kavanaugh Bay sounds familiar, but I don't know that I've ever landed there. So that question comes from Atlas Wegman. Let's see, new to the channel, so trying to get caught up on stuff. Well, thanks, Mike. Welcome to the party. Got tons of videos for you. Scroll down, and after every video, there's a recommended video. Click that and keep on trucking. Thank you for your support and welcome. I hope you enjoy it. I'll keep making content as much as I can. Practice, practice, practice. Alex, you're exactly right. You know, the best way to develop your skill is just like anything. There's no magic secret sauce. It's getting out there and flying your airplane and learning where its limitations are, and figuring out exactly where those things are is super important. Flying by feel, trusting that training that you'll get from a good instructor. And that's really what's going to keep you safe and increase your enjoyment. Because if you're filled with anxiety and you're sweating bullets and you're scared of what's going on, or there's so many unknowns because you're not practiced, it just sucks the fun out of it. So really, if you want to have the best smiles per dollar and smiles per the amount of investment that you make in your time, because time is the most precious resource, is practice, practice, practice. And do that in a safe environment at higher altitudes so that you can feel confident in your own skill set as you move that needle further and further towards your goals. And don't be afraid to set goals. You know, I remember my flight instructor, I learned in a Citabria and then a decathlon. And I remember my flight instructor, this is back when you could do a lot to airports, and some airports will let you do this. He would chalk lines as I was doing touch and goes in my primary flight training. And it wasn't just a matter of landing on the runway for me in my primary flight training. It was nailing a spot, staying on center line, having good discipline, and don't letting yourself off the hook. Like if you're doing touch and goes, focus on developing your skill set. In the shooting world, when we're doing long range target shooting, if you're aiming for a big target and you're just like, oh, my goal is to hit the target, that's not very good discipline. You aim for a very specific, the smallest point you can find on that target. And if you aim small, you'll miss small. And you're going to for sure hit that huge target, but you want to be right there. You want to be right there on target. And so set your goals very, very, very tight and have good discipline. And say, okay, well, my goal today, because I'm not really great at my lateral control, staying on center line, is that I'm going to start nailing center line. Forget where I'm landing as far as, you know, up or down the runway. If I'm landing in the first third of the runway, that's okay. But today I'm going to nail that center line. And I'm going to put my nose wheel or my tail wheel right there on that friggin' center line, and my airplane's going to be center line come hell or high water, and practice that skill until it becomes second nature, like walking and chewing gum. And then move on to something else. Okay, now I want to nail a spot landing. I want to land on a line, and I want to nail that landing. I'm going to control my power. I'm going to get behind the curve, and I'm just going to plant my wheels exactly where I want them. And because you already worked on center line control, that's going to come more naturally, and you're going to see yourself progress. It's those kinds of basic skills development, like running drills in sports, that are going to get you there. And there's no magic to it. So that sounds really cool, Atlas. I'm going to definitely check that out. Priest Lake. I like it. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I love all these comments. That is awesome. Flight simulators are great too. Of course, they have diminishing returns as far as your actual experience. So the best thing is getting up in an airplane. But any type of flying right now is a real blessing. The most important thing right now for everybody to do is stay safe and stay healthy. So let's do that, and let's all do that together. Practice your health discipline. You know, the 6-foot separation when you're out and you have to go to the grocery store, or you're out in any public scenario. Wash your hands very often, that 20-second rule. What I like to do is sing the happy birthday song 2 times in a row. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. If you sing that song 2 times, it's about 20 seconds long. And so I just do that. I'm in the habit of singing that happy birthday song, and I'm hoping somebody's receiving the message if it's their birthday. Anyway, thank you so much. I want you guys to know how much I really appreciate you interacting and joining me on these live streams. Chad over there on Facebook, he can't see all the comments from everybody. I've got kind of this Restream software. It's really awesome. So I see all the different chats from all the platforms all in one place. So that's really awesome. Got Crammy Davis Jr. I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream here. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. We'll see you on the next one. Might be tomorrow. We will see. Once again, stay safe. Take care. I appreciate you. Bye. I got to wait a few seconds so I don't cut things off. Ah, that sounds good right there. I'm going to enjoy the fire.